Welcome to my channel people, author link will be on the description. Disc, you weaklings actually forced me to resort to showing my true form. Ashiki spoke with a tone full of scorn while staring at Bakuryo's decapitated head and the shocked expression on it. He didn't feel satisfied with how quickly he won, but he didn't find it surprising as well. After all, he was an Otsutsuki, and a member of the main family branch to Boost, unlike Kagaya. However, just as Ashiki got blinded by his ego, Bakuryo's decapitated head suddenly smirked at him before transforming into a white substance and exploding, creating a terrifying shockwave. However, Ashiki quickly raised his hand and started absorbing the explosion with a cold look on his face before he muttered, "This is surprising. Your clone technique is quite advanced to the point that even I can't tell them apart." Then, he scanned the area around him before he launched a dozen gigantic pillars at where Mukai fell previously after sensing that he was still alive. "It seems like he wants to force me to protect Mukai. Tisk. We are dealing with a being above the super cage level here. Even Murakumo doesn't stand a chance against the current Ashiki. This is problematic." However, Bakuryo's eyes flickered slightly in his hidden spot, and smirked after hearing a loud yell. "You really think I need protection?" It was Mukai, and he actually rushed out of the ground with 7 gates opened directly along with his third eye. He wasn't playing around anymore. "You." Ashiki could barely say this when Mukai's new reptilian eyes locked into his location and he started jumping at him like a mad beast while using the pillars thrown at him for support. Ashiki couldn't imagine why he, a god, would feel fear from a mere human, but he did the moment Mukai got near him, and it only increased when he heard him say, "Ultimate Fist First Style. Dragon's Might." The terrifying chakra and steam surrounding Mukai's body suddenly started condensing until it formed into a giant Eastern Azure dragon that contracted even further by twisting its giant body around itself while Mukai entered a striking stance all in a mere instant, giving Ashiki no time to dodge. Then, he punched with all his might at Ashiki, causing the air itself to shake while the dragon started rushing at him with unstoppable momentum. Ashiki instantly used his Daikokuden to summon multiple objects to protect him, and he was glad he did as the dragon broke all of them until it landed on his body in its weakened form and still pushed him far into the distance, but he remained unscathed. "I underestimated you. You are strong, but that's only for human standards." Ashiki spoke coldly with his god complex still on full display before he rushed at the surprised Mukai with a terrifying speed that made him appear as if he was teleporting, and Mukai could feel countless projectiles appearing out of nowhere and aiming for every vital spot on his body. However, he didn't panic and simply said, "Ultimate Fist Second Style, Impenetrable Tortoise." After saying this, Mukai started rotating in a way similar to the Hyuga's revolving heaven, but the amount of chakra gushing out of his body was simply too much, and the more he turned the more it condensed into a harder and harder sphere until it turned into a giant tortoise carapace that left no blind spots undefended. Countless clanging sounds echoed as Ishiki's projectiles weren't able to go through Mukai's defense, and even the might of his punches and kicks that could easily kill someone like Hashirama wasn't able to break through this defense, so he couldn't help but frown, especially when the sphere kept growing bigger the more he attacked it. This guy. How did he execute this technique so fast? The other one was also executed at an unimaginable speed. Ashiki was truly confused, but before he could react, Mukai's voice suddenly drifted into his ears. "Ultimate Fist Thirst Style. Karmic Retribution." At this point, Ashiki suddenly noticed the carapace glowing with a weird golden light that condensed into Mukai's right hand. He had a gentle look on his face, making him appear like some sort of a Buddha, but the sense of danger Ashiki felt made him disregard the tricky image, yet even then he was only watching in slow motion as Mukai pushed that light in his direction slowly. However, it wasn't slow. In fact, it was sickeningly fast to the point that even someone like Ashiki wasn't able to react to it, and before he could even do anything, that light transformed into a giant beam that sent him flying far into the distance, and many parts of his body started disintegrating. He even started hearing cracks in his stomach where his seals were highly concentrated. Impossible. How could a human be this powerful and fast? No. He probably absorbed the power of my previous attacks with his tortoise technique before launching them back at me in the form of that concentrated beam. Ashiki couldn't contemplate further as his vision became completely golden and he felt embraced by a warm light. However, he did his best to resist it and not fall into its temptation, because that would be his end. So this is Mukai's strength, huh? Bakurio's eyes widened slightly at this display of power, but something else suddenly attracted his attention. Ah! A terrifying aura gushed from Ishiki's body and shifted the direction of what remained of Mukai's attack, exposing his body in the process and the damage he sustained. No legs, no hands, only his limbless upper body, and the head remained, and they were filled with bone-deep lacerations. However, Ishiki's Otsutsuki genes instantly kicked in and started healing him while he said arrogantly to Mukai, who was panting slightly while clutching his now closed third eye. As I guessed, your third eye grants you the power to execute any technique instantly. I applaud you, young man. Taijutsu is one of the very few things that can affect me, and your mastery of it is unmatched. Be proud, you can die with your head held high. Mukai had a dark look on his face after seeing that Ishiki wasn't dead yet. However, it quickly turned into a smirk as he said, "Me. Die. It seems like you are forgetting that I'm not fighting here alone. You expect that weakling who's hiding to save you. I'm disappointed," Ishiki replied while his limbs were already growing back, but Mukai's smirk didn't fade as he said, "Are you sure he's a weakling? I wouldn't be so confident if I were you. Show him your might, Bakurio." Ah, it can't be avoided. Ishiki quickly raised his head to see the source of this voice, and his eyes couldn't help but narrow in the process as high in the air above him wasn't one or two people, no. There were 12 of them. And they all had the same aura as Bakurio. No. In fact, they appeared far stronger than the one he previously fought, and he heard one of them say calmly, "Thanks for buying me enough time, Mukai, you can leave the rest to me now." What's with this aura? Ishiki felt something wasn't right with those clones, and he was right as these were Bakurio's strongest clones. 2 of them had power similar to the original body before the upgrade in his body's talent, while the other 10 retained 80% of his strength. But most importantly, they all went through a bloodline evolution and gained both Hashirama's and Madara's bloodline, and one of them even had the Rinnegan he got from Nagato. Ishiki watched in shock as the clones suddenly all said at the same time. Instant bind, and he found his body suddenly frozen without the ability to move. This. When did he put these seals in my body? Then, before he could break the seal, he watched in horror as the clones moved at the same and surrounded him instantly before they muttered. Synchronized Genjutsu. Land of Death. All 12 pairs of eyes suddenly cast this Genjutsu at the frozen Ishiki at the same time, and before he could even lift a finger, he suddenly found himself in a completely dark and eerie land filled with skeletons of all kinds of beings, and he instantly started trying to break through it, but it wasn't easy. As for his body, the 12 clones calmly extended their death-covered hands that were further empowered with 6 paths chakra toward him without a shred of mercy in their eyes, until they heard something break in Ishiki's body. His life force ran out. What kind of genjutsu is this? Ishiki muttered to himself as he kept fighting the countless waves of skeletons rushing at him, yet no matter how much he struggled and even used all of his power, there simply didn't appear to be an end to this world or the undead attacking him. I need to get out of here before it's too late. Ishiki just had this thought when he suddenly felt his connection with Jigen's body fading away. Meanwhile, in Kara's dimension, Ishiki's body slowly melted away under the effect of Bakurio's death release that was enhanced by his 6 paths chakra. That genjutsu was quite scary. Mukai spoke calmly after appearing beside the clones and observed the dissipating Ishiki. However, he suddenly sensed something jumping out of his body and rushing at one of the clones. Careful, his soul is trying to take over your body, Mukai yelled, but he could only watch as that soul quickly disappeared into one of the clones, the same one Ishiki branded with his Kama. Thanks for getting all of these compatible vessels right to my doorstep. Don't think I will let you go now. Ishiki spoke inside Bakurio's head and started trying to take over his body while Mukai prepared to destroy him. However, Bakurio calmly raised his hand to stop him and said, "Don't worry, everything is moving according to my plans." What do you mean? Mukai asked while staring at Bakurio's body, which started growing a horn and appeared to be struggling. So the one with the Rinnegan suddenly spoke, "Step back and watch." Mukai nodded and did as asked before he opened his third eye and observed what was happening. Instantly his vision shifted and he could see everything so clearly, including Bakurio's life force and soul, and he also saw Ishiki's soul lurking inside him. However, he was even more shocked when the clones moved into a special formation and he felt their souls glowing slightly. What's going on here? Mukai wondered, but Bakurio's next words gave him a hint. Soul prison. Just as he said this, Mukai noticed countless invisible beams leaving the clones' bodies and entering the Kama seal where Ishiki's soul was hiding. Ishiki started resisting those beams with all of his power, but it wasn't enough, especially when the clones entered a meditative state and started gathering power from the other clones all over the world. Impossible. How can a human have such intricate control over their soul? Impossible. Nothing is impossible. My soul has been strengthened by sage arts, and then it went through countless tears and recoveries until it reached a terrifying degree of sturdiness. Don't think that just because you are an Otsutsuki, nothing can match you. Bakuryo's cold voice echoed in Ishiki's ears before he found himself bound by Bakuryo's soul prison. Mukai, give me your hand, Bakuryo asked calmly, and Mukai only stared at him with a perplexed look for a split second before he extended his hand toward him. Then, he watched as the Kama on Bakuryo's hand suddenly floated out of his body and entered his hand. However, different from the original one, this current one had white spots on it. This isn't perfect, but it should be enough to stop Ishiki from taking over your body, and with the special Kohinata bloodline that even allowed you to integrate the dragon's bloodline, I'm sure you will be able to integrate the power of this Otsutsuki. Why give this power to me when you can have it yourself? Mukai asked in confusion, and Bakuryo fell silent slightly before he patted him on the shoulder and said, I need someone I trust to share my burdens with. Mukai felt touched at how much Bakuryo trusted him, although he had his doubts if this was the true reason, but he quickly recovered into his laid-back appearance and said, sure, leave it to me. Bakuryo faintly smiled at the clearly embarrassed Mukai before he simply said, let's go back. Then he teleported him with the Flying Thunder God Jutsu back to Konoha, although he left one of his clones to investigate the dimension more thoroughly. As for Ishiki, he can only lament inside the now modified seal. I can't believe it, how? How was he able to modify my Kama? This world shouldn't have such knowledge of seals. However, there was no one there to console him, nor will he ever know of the existence of Bakuryo's system. Inside Bakuryo's base, Kagaya suddenly opened her eyes and asked, is he dead? Bakuryo slowly entered the room and took a seat in front of her before he said with a smile, no, his fate is much worse, he's going to be a fertilizer for Mukai to grow even stronger. Then he showed her what he did and it left Kagaya speechless, but she eventually calmed down and said, you are strange, you actually managed to take Ishiki down. Well, you can stop worrying now. If your family comes to this world, just leave it to me, I will protect it, and I will protect you as well. Kagaya's eyes widened in shock when she heard this, but she could tell that Bakuryo was telling the truth, which caused her heart to start beating faster and her face to redden slightly. What's this that I'm feeling? This man is really strange. Seeing this, Bakuryo smiled slightly before he stood up and said, I have to go now, there's something I need to do. Kagaya nodded silently and watched him disappear. Meanwhile, not far from this room were Hagoromo's and Hamura's rooms, and the two of them were currently discussing among themselves, something must be happening for Bakuryo to visit our mother this often. I believe so as well, Hamura. Let's go ask her, he might need our help. Hagoromo spoke calmly, so they both went to Kagura's room. However, they remained speechless for a long time as they stared at her clearly red complexion, and she appeared to be daydreaming about something. Brother, do you think that? Hamura stared at his brother with a terrified look on his face, but Hagoromo directly grabbed him and disappeared before he said, we saw nothing. Kagaya stared at her kids running away awkwardly with a tilted head before she smiled slightly and said what she couldn't say to Bakuryo earlier, thank you, for everything. Meanwhile, inside his dark cocoon, Bakuryo's main body received the memories of what happened, and he smiled slightly before he muttered. Who would have thought that Madara's bloodline is this strong as well? Flashback. After having integrated the Hashirama bloodline, Bakuryo set his sight on the best next thing on the list, the Uchiha bloodline. Currently his bloodline was only 50%, so he wanted to enhance it. Bloodline collector activated. Please choose a bloodline from the samples you have in your inventory. Sample chosen. Uchiha. Purity 95%. Integration requirements. Level 100 Fire, Lightning, Yin Chakra Transformations, Level 100 Chakra Control, respected or higher reputation with the Uchiha clan. It's good that I already fulfill all the requirements, so I don't have to waste my time, Bakurio muttered slightly before directly initiating the integration process. Initiating bloodline integration. Current progress 1%. 5%. Bakurio felt heat coursing through every inch of his body, but it was mostly concentrated in his eyes and chakra channels. He noticed that, unlike Hashirama's bloodline which made his chakra vessels bigger, Madara's bloodline focused on making them much sturdier so that they can handle even bigger quantities of chakra. A few minutes later, many notifications popped in his face. Congratulations host on gaining the Uchiha bloodline. Purity 95%. Congratulations host on gaining the Uchiha bloodline. Purity 95%. Your chakra capacity has increased by 2 times, it doubled after the increase from Hashirama's bloodline. You gained the ninjutsu talent Grandmaster. Your affinity toward fire, lightning, and yin releases has increased by 95%. Your master taijutsu talent and medium Hutner talent have advanced to Grandmaster level and your chakra Grandmaster talent has advanced into supreme level. Your clones with this bloodline can surpass the constrictions of their incomplete souls and unlock higher levels of dojutsu. Bakurio was speechless for a long time after seeing this, but he knew it was real as he could sense the changes occurring to his body and thought process from his newly improved talents and abilities. However, the changes didn't stop there as he received another notification. Your Uchiha's bloodline has surpassed 70%, so the dormant effect of Indra's chakra has been acquired by the host. Plus 100% strength to the user dojutsu powers and control. Minus 80% chakra consumption to all dojutsu related uses. Bakurio was flabbergasted, but this wasn't even the end of the notifications as he felt heat rushing to his eyes causing them to turn completely purple with many swirls appearing inside them. I finally reached this point, but I can still grow much stronger. Bakurio's eyes flickered in delight and he directly ordered his clones to start training on the evolved Mangekyo powers once they end up dealing with Ashiki. Flashback ends. It won't be long before you will fall into my grasp, Jashin. Bakurio muttered coldly before he closed his eyes and refocused on strengthening his body again. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, after going back to Konoha, Bakurio was intrigued by the abilities Mukai gained, so he asked him directly, Mukai, what the hell is up with that third eye of yours, and how did you manage to absorb this bloodline and inherit its powers? Mukai didn't hide anything from Bakurio and simply shrugged and replied, that guy Ashiki is no slouch, he actually captured a dragon general, an SS plus ranked beast if judged by your standards, and in the hope of strengthening my body so that I can become a suitable vessel for him, he injected me with something they called the dragon core. Bakurio's eyes flickered slightly as he thought, it seems like that doctor might prove to be useful if he could actually discover that the dragon's power comes from these weird cores they have. Then he heard Mukai continue his explanation, at first I was overwhelmed by the power of that dragon's core and bloodline, but then my own bloodline seemed to react and it actually started fighting back and devouring the dragon's bloodline. I don't know how that happened though, however, knowing that my fate would have been quite bad if they realized my achievement, I made it so that the fight between the two bloodlines reaches a stalemate and make it appear as if it was a failure until you came. That's when I resumed the merging and I gained these abilities. Bakurio nodded at him in admiration and said, do you know what it's called? Mukai nodded calmly and replied, yes, this eye is called Panlong. So far, I only know that it can make me skip preparations when I want to cast a jutsu, but it's very consuming on my chakra supply to use. I also gained a dragon body that greatly raised all of my attributes, but especially defense, in fact. Mukai paused slightly, causing Bakurio's curiosity to intensify before he said, I believe I can now open the 8 gates without dying, although I can only sustain it for a very short amount of time. Bakurio was shocked at this revelation before he patted Mukai on the shoulder and said, you are amazing. Well, I'm going to see my family now, see you around, before he disappeared quickly, bringing a smile to Bakurio's face. He felt happy, everything was going according to his plans and even better as he was continuously growing stronger, whether it is by training or completing quests such as befriending the tailed beasts. Soon, everything will be over, Bakurio muttered with a slight smile on his face before he moved back home and started checking on his various businesses with Makoto and Kushina. However, something that was happening in the dark was way out of his expectations, including the disappearance of a certain Ten Tails that was hidden in Kara's dimension, all under the veil of darkness. As for Ashiki, he struggled tirelessly inside Bakuryo's soul prison to no avail, so he eventually calmed down and started thinking, how? How did he brand me with those binding seals without me realizing? The sequences of the fight repeated themselves in Ishiki's head, and eventually, he recalled when he split Bakuryo's head in half and watched him transform into a white substance before exploding with a smirk on his face, and his eyes couldn't help but widen in shock. Don't tell me, he didn't explode all of his body at that time, and instead turned some parts of it into microscopic clay clones that used the explosion as cover and branded me with the seals before they got absorbed. How cunning. I underestimated this human. But it won't be over, someone will definitely come to investigate this world, and once the clan takes action, nothing will be able to stop them. Ashiki was right, Bakuryo actually used Deidara's unique explosive clay to create this jutsu, and it was almost impossible to defend again. Still, he wasn't planning to give up any time soon and started sending a unique signal through his soul so that other Otsutsuki members can find him. However, did such a thing really skip Bakuryo's notice? Ellipsis. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. The world during this time had seen great changes. Stronger demons were appearing, making the defense that consisted of the tailed beasts not enough anymore. Similarly, the devils emerging from hell kept growing stronger and stronger, and now even the weakest of them require a Jonin or a team of Chunin to face. Strong beasts started gathering together under the leadership of SS or higher beasts and formed danger zones that no man can step on without risking losing their lives. And the dead became more active than ever as they kept taking advantage of their immortality to terrorize the world. They even banded with the beasts to make sealing them even more difficult. However, just as the dangers of this world were getting bigger, those defending it also grew stronger, whether it be the younger generation or the old one. However, this also made the people realize that the final battle was getting closer and closer. Ellipsis. Currently fighting a bunch of beasts, Sogetsu casually froze a few undead Jonin before turning his attention to the demons that were trying to break through their defense. Neji, any updates on when help is going to arrive? Sogetsu asked calmly while staring at the sea of demons that had multiple cage levels among their ranks and even 2 above that level. The nearest squad is still 10 minutes away from here, Neji replied, prompting Sogetsu to fix his sight on the 2 SS-ranked demons and say, I will leave the squad for you to command, I will deal with those 2 monsters first. But Sogetsu, they are too strong, let me come help you. Lee suddenly requested to assist Sogetsu, but he simply shook his head and said, no, there are plenty of strong demons, just focus on surviving and protecting the rest of the squad. Then, Sogetsu smiled slightly and rushed at the 2 demons while the peaceful demon kept whispering in his ears with a tempting voice, do you want help? After 3 years of constant training, Sogetsu's body grew to become both tall and very muscular. However, even then, he still looked like a tiny ant compared to the 2 giant demons in front of him. One of them was 10 meters tall, its skin was crimson and had a metallic shine. He has 3 pairs of hands, the right ones held giant black clubs and the left hands each held a giant black shield. It had 3 heads, and 2 short horns grew from their foreheads, and his eyes were full of brutality and madness. Sogetsu could tell from a glance that it couldn't wait to rip him apart and sink its giant fangs into his body. Meanwhile, the other demon was a woman. She had long flowing green hair with a horn coming from the top of her head and slitted pupils in her eyes, but what was even more eye-catching about her was the fact that her lower body was that of a snake, a very long snake. In her hands was a black bow, however, she wasn't holding any arrows and it made Sogetsu frown slightly. Human, why do you have this smell? The smell of a demon coming from your body. The giant demon Akami spoke with a rough voice while the demoness beside him simply observed Sogetsu with a playful smirk on her face as her long snake tail kept wagging back and forth. Who knows? Sogetsu replied aloofly, finding it beneath him to talk to this kind of brute, but it got on Akami's nerves, so he directly rushed at Sogetsu and swung one of his giant clubs at him. Boom. A giant explosion sound echoed throughout the battlefield, and the ground where Sogetsu was previously standing now had a giant deep crater. Hee, you dodged. Not bad, brat, but that won't be enough, spoke Mimab with a teasing tone. I can't take this guy's attacks head on, Sogetsu concluded with a frown after seeing the destructiveness of Akami's attack. Then he did some quick hand signs and said, water release. Giant Dragon Jutsu. Suddenly, a huge quantity of water manifested itself around Sogetsu in the form of a 30 meters long horned dragon which he directly launched at Akami. Little brat, are you underestimating me? Akami yelled with such ferocity that it shook the earth and almost uprooted the trees near him before he swung his 3 giant clubs and crushed Sogetsu's water dragon. However, just as he did, Sogetsu did some quick hand signs and said, "Water release, deadly rain jutsu." Akami and Mimab watched in amazement as the water droplets transformed into sharp kunai and started falling on them. However, Akami was quick to react and raised his shield to defend the two of them. "Cunning kid, you are ruthless, just like a snake. I like it." Mimab licked her lips slightly. But suddenly, Sogetsu felt a terrible sense of danger and he was barely fast enough to react and jump backward to avoid the deadly snake tail that emerged from the ground under him without making a sound. She sent her tail underground when my vision was obstructed by the demon's shield. This fight isn't going to be easy, Sogetsu thought with a frown. You got quite the instincts. I'm liking you even more, kid. How about you become my pet? Mimab spoke with a seductive smile, but Akami suddenly shut her down with a yell from its left head. Don't waste our time here, Mimab. Let's quickly get rid of this kid. Before he started rushing at Sogetsu again, but this time they noticed that he had an eerie aura surrounding him as he glared coldly at them and asked, "Did you just say you want to make me your pet?" Hehehe, that's right. What are you going to do about it? Mimab asked mockingly and Sogetsu simply replied by doing hand signs and saying, "Boil release, acid vapor." Akami realized something was wrong with the water he was stepping on and was quick to react and jumped into the air while warning Mimab, who had most of her body submerged in water, "Careful." However, it was too late as the water that was covering her body started boiling and transforming into a deadly gas that could even melt the defense of a Susanoo, causing Mimab to hiss in pain as huge patches of her hard skin that was covered in scales melted away. Aghhhhh, damned brat, I will kill you, she yelled hysterically before she raised her bow and aimed it at Sogetsu before she said, "Void arrow." Sogetsu didn't see any arrow appear in the bow. However, as she released the string, a terrible sense of dread hit him, and when he lowered his head, he noticed a huge hole has formed in his stomach. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, as Sogetsu was facing the two SS-rank demons, his squad found themselves faced with 10 S-ranks demons coupled with countless As and Bs following behind them. Lee instantly opened 7 gates and rushed to take on 3 S-rank demons on his own while Neji stood in at the front of the group to defend everyone like a giant impenetrable fortress. Behind them was a small mountain and it helped to lessen the direction the enemies can attack from. Luckily they weren't fighting alone as this squad was made of 20 highly trained ninjas, that had Asuma, Kiba, Shikamaru, Shino, and so on, and they were currently fighting as a group to keep the army of demons at bay. Asuma was fighting an S-rank demon on his own. He was far stronger than his canon self but he still barely managed to achieve such a feat, while the other were working in groups to stop the rest of the demons. However, they knew this was a losing battle so they were buying time for their tactician to find a way out of this situation. Currently, Shikamaru was biting his nails and analyzing the battlefield from every possible angle while thinking, "It will be a miracle if we can leave this situation alive." Think Shikamaru, quickly. Countless thoughts and ideas flashed through Shikamaru's head, but suddenly he remembered something Bakurio once told him, "Teacher, in a fight where the odds are 100% against you and the opponents vastly outnumber you or are simply stronger than you, how can anyone win such a fight?" That's a good question, and the answer is simple. You don't, Bakurio replied with a slight smile which made Shikamaru pout slightly and complain, "Then what will you do in such a situation?" If I were facing someone stronger than me, or if I'm outnumbered, such a hopeless situation, as I said, I will consider the fight lost. In other meaning, I don't mind taking high risks that might actually flip the situation or at least make it equal. After all, the worst that could happen is death. War isn't meant to be played fairly, and I will even bite my opponents or spit at them if it increases my chances of winning by a fraction. I will use every skill I have, lay traps, and use the terrain until I find a way out. Right, if we want to survive this war, we will have to fight dirty. Shikamaru's eyes suddenly narrowed before he started issuing commands. Ino, connect me with the minds of everyone around us. Ino quickly nodded and rushed to his side and held his head gently before executing her clan's mind-body transmission jutsu. And Shikamaru instantly started relaying his plan to the other ninjas, starting by saying, Choji, I need you to grow as big as you can and cause a landslide at the mountain behind us. Those that can use earth release, help those that can't escape underground. Tenten, follow Choji and use the scrolls. Ha 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 ha, this horrified expression of the faces you humans make before you die is truly breathtaking. I can't get enough of it. Mimab spoke with an euphoric look on her face while hugging her bow closely to her body. Meanwhile, all three heads of Akami stared coldly at Sogetsu, who had a large hole in his stomach that was dripping with blood, and he couldn't help but say, that's what you get for overestimating yourself. Then, they watched as Sogetsu fell to his back, causing a splash of water since the area was still drenched, but just as the two demons turned their sight on the rest of the humans, Sogetsu's body directly melted into the water and appeared behind Mimab like a silent assassin. Behind you. One of Akami's heads managed to detect Sogetsu, but it was too late as he put his hand on Mimab's injured body while saying, Ice release. Flash freeze. Ice quickly formed all over Mimab's body and it spread instantly to cover her, but a giant club came crashing at Sogetsu just when the ice was about to reach her head, so he was forced to dodge, and the shockwave from the attack created a strong wind that uprooted many trees. You think I will let you freeze her? Akami spoke coldly while Sogetsu simply glared at him and snorted before he said, Tisk, even if you interfered quickly, it won't change the fact that she's injured and that now you will have to fight me on your own. However, to Sogetsu's surprise, Akami simply shook his head and said, Mimab. Injured. Stop underestimating us. Sogetsu tilted his head in confusion, but then his eyes couldn't help but widen in shock as the frozen Mimab opened her mouth to an unreasonable degree. Then, another her started coming out of it in a very grotesque and slimy Orochimaru fashion. Is she shedding her injured skin? This is bad. Sogetsu frowned slightly before he muttered, it seems like I will have to go all out. Akami was confused by what Sogetsu meant, but suddenly, weird seals started covering his body before eventually turning into yellow swirls around his eyes. This was the turtle sage transformation. Then he quickly did some hand signs and said coldly, Ice release, Ice Queen Jutsu. Akami felt a giant amount of sage chakra manifesting from Sogetsu's body, and it directly transformed into a terrifying amount of ice that took the shape of a very beautiful woman wearing a crown on her head and holding a staff in her hands that was emitting a terrifying cold aura. The Ice Queen was at least 100 meters tall and Sogetsu was standing above its crown, and the moment she opened her eyes, every single thing in a 1 kilometer radius instantly froze, Akami and Mimab that just escaped her injured body included. I never underestimate my opponents, Sogetsu muttered coldly before he manipulated the ice goddess to smash the two frozen demons into pieces with her giant staff. However, just as that was about to happen, two eerie voices suddenly echoed throughout the area, followed by a weird demonic aura that ignited on the two demons' bodies. Demonic gift. Tyrant 1. Demonic gift. Void Seeker. Then, in a split second, Sogetsu noticed Akami's body grow bigger and break through the ice before he jumped in the air to face the Ice Queen's staff head-on. Meanwhile, Mimab's giant body suddenly disappeared, leaving only an empty shell of ice in its place before she appeared in the air above him with her giant bow stretched to the limit, and she muttered with a venomous tone, Void Arrow. The Ice Queen's staff got deflected, but her eyes suddenly started shining, and from them emerged two rays of light that froze something in the air. It was the arrow Mimab unleashed. These two are strong, Sogetsu thought, and a battle to the death instantly started. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, back with the rest of his team, Choji suddenly grew to the size of a small mountain, taking the demons by surprise before he smashed the mountain behind them into pieces, causing them to fall everywhere and create a chaotic scene. Many demons that couldn't escape in time were instantly engulfed in the rumble. However, not a single S-rank demon was harmed by it, and they were about to retaliate when suddenly Tenten, who was standing on Choji's shoulder, opened a huge scroll that Bakurio made himself, and just as she did, many writings in the scroll lit up and started shooting a weird light into the sky, and a bunch of other lights hit the demons. What's this supposed to mean? One of the S-rank demons that resemble a centipede with a human's upper body asked coldly and prepared to shoot everyone with his poison after noticing that the light didn't cause him any harm, but they suddenly disappeared from his vision as if they never existed before, all of course, courtesy of Ranmaru's dojutsu. Confused, the demon didn't understand anything, if only he realized that everyone was running for their lives, including Lee and Asuma that were fighting the demons. What's going on? Why did they retreat? The demons were confused, but one of them who had weird giant ears suddenly stared at the sky with a horrified look on his face. Impossible, how could this be possible? This demon with a small body and giant ears couldn't help but question all of his understanding about the world of ninjas because he could hear it. Above them, a meteor shower suddenly started falling from the sky, making it seem like the apocalypse was happening. Run! That demon yelled, and the strong S-rank demons that sensed what was happening also started escaping. However, as the giant meteors started growing closer, the demons suddenly realized something. There were 10 meteors in total, and they were following the S-rank demons with unnatural precision. No matter where they tried to escape, the meteors quickly adjusted their trajectory like homing missiles. So, with no other choice, the S-rank demons stopped in place and ordered their scared underlings to help them defend. Instantly, countless defenses and demon gifts were activated. Semicolon. Boom boom boom. One explosion after the other echoed as some meteors were destroyed and their debris hit the earth and killed many weaker demons in the process, while the smarter demons tried to stop the meteors instead. Luckily for them, these meteors weren't as strong as the ones Madara summoned during the Fourth Ninja War, otherwise, they would have all been eradicated. Meanwhile, from the rubble of the mountain that Choji destroyed, Sogetsu's team suddenly emerged from the cover of Ranmaru's genjutsu, showing that they actually never escaped from there, and Asuma, who was now back with them, couldn't help but mutter in shock. That scroll Bakurio gave you is truly terrifying. He could wipe out a hidden village with it easily. But he said that he can only create a few of them as they require unique materials that can manipulate gravity. However, this forbidden scroll he created is truly a work of art. Tenten's eyes were full of admiration and obsession as she caressed the giant scroll in her hand that had "Meteor Shower" written on it. Ellipsis. However, this wasn't enough to kill the demons, and just as they were about to relax, a giant centipede that was more than 100 meters tall emerged from the ground in front of them and yelled, "Humans, you will regret what you did to our kind. Don't think that you will escape after this." The group was about to panic as they could see other S-rank demons coming their way, but Shikamaru's voice quickly traveled to their heads. "Don't worry everyone, they are injured, we will definitely find a way to beat them." "Yes," the others replied before they readied themselves to fight again. Sogetsu let out continuous sighs. He was exhausted, his body riddled with injuries, and his chakra reserves were almost empty. The battlefield around him was in a state of ruin and covered in ice and giant craters, as if giant meteors had fallen into it. The lower half of his Ice Queen was shattered, and he was currently embraced by her while his enemies rained continuous attacks on her back. God damn it, how can I fail to defeat these demons, how? Sogetsu stared through the ice at the two demons that were riddled with injuries but didn't seem to care at all. There was no pain in their eyes. In fact, all he can see was a primal desire to rip him apart. Calm down and think of what you can do, Sogetsu thought, but a voice suddenly whispered to him again, "Use my power, you can easily kill these weaklings with it." Sogetsu frowned slightly as a hesitant look appeared on his face. "The power of the peaceful demon, huh? Yes, with my power, no one will be able to stop you," Suiya whispered with a tempting tone, but Sogetsu suddenly cut him off and said, "Teacher said that a demon's gift is what they need the most. I wonder, Suiya, were you peaceful before your gift or after it?" Suiya went silent for a split second before he responded calmly, "What does that have to do with the current situation?" "Oh, to me it matters. Anyways, I don't need your help yet," Sogetsu replied coldly, but a mocking laugh suddenly echoed from Suiya. "Do you really plan to use that attack? It will leave you defenseless for a long time." "It doesn't matter, since you don't want to lend me your power without gaining your freedom first. Let's just die together then. Either way, I'd rather die than let you act as you wish," Sogetsu replied calmly, causing Suiya to lose his calm and snarl at him. "Stupid brat. You will definitely regret this decision." Suiya kept blabbering in Sogetsu's head, but he simply directly cut his connection with him and stared at the two demons coldly before he caressed the face of the Ice Queen, whose back was riddled with holes, gently. "You did well." Then, he calmly closed his eyes and entered a state of absolute focus. What's going on? Akami instantly felt a faint sense of danger, but he didn't understand why. But the giant body of the Ice Queen suddenly exploded, forcing them to retreat. And just as they recovered their footing, he heard Mima murmuring, "Is it snowing?" Akami raised his head and noticed that the giant body of the Ice Queen disappeared and was instead replaced with white snow rising slowly into the sky, and it appeared like it was going to fall down again soon. Something feels fishy here, Akami muttered before he shot Sogetsu a look and noticed that his eyes were still closed, but now he had a weird crown on his head, and it resembled that of the Snow Queen. And the moment he opened his eyes, the crown started shining and a cold wave passed by the two of them. Akami, careful, that brat had just frozen the space around us and I can't use my gift anymore, Mimab yelled in shock. Freezing space, it seems like this brat is willing to live or die with this last move of his. Fine, I will entertain you. Akami had a wide grin on his face when he said this before he readied his body in an attacking posture, and suddenly, his three shields transformed into giant black clubs as well, and his muscles enlarged beyond their limit before he said, "Six-fold tyrant destruction." Mimab couldn't do much since space was sealed, but she was shocked when she saw Akami going all out. That brat is dead. Meanwhile, Sogetsu simply stared at the terrifying attack that compressed the air to unimaginable degrees heading his way, but he only had the power to mutter, "Ice release. Ice Queen sorrow." Then, he calmly gestured with his finger downward, causing the snow to start falling, and the two demons instantly realized that something wasn't right with its speed. However, they couldn't dodge it, and only when they got hit by it did they realize a terrifying fact. Every single snowdrop weighed more than a ton, and there were tens of thousands of them falling at a speed that surpassed sound. No. Akami, save me, Mimab yelled, but she was riddled with holes before Akami could do anything to save her. Meanwhile, Akami quickly transformed his clubs into shields and guarded his body from all directions, but his stamina started getting depleted at a frightening rate and he couldn't help but yell, "Damned brat!" before his voice was drowned in the deadly snow as well. Meanwhile, Sogetsu stared at the attack heading his way silently before he smiled slightly and thought, "It seems like this is the end for me." However, just as he resigned himself to his fate, a cloaked man suddenly appeared in front of him and held his hand toward the attack, and Sogetsu was barely able to catch a glimpse of a black and white skeleton appeared in front of them before a huge explosion echoed and he lost his consciousness. "You did well not to fall for the temptation of that demon," Bakurio, who blocked the attack with his Susanoo and exoskeleton, spoke with a slight smile on his face, and he didn't know if Sogetsu heard him or not, but he could see that he had a relaxed smile on his face. However, two bloody demons suddenly came from the ground, one in front and another behind him, and they both said at the same time, "Void Demolisher, 12FOLD Tyrant Destruction." Not bad, you two are strong. To think you escaped under the ground to minimize the damage, although I can tell that you two are barely holding on to dear life. The duo didn't care at all about what Bakurio said and directly yelled, "Die." However, Bakurio's true clone simply shrugged and activated his level 100 high Yomi no Kuni, causing four dark eerie chains to appear out of nowhere and instantly rip the two demons apart along with their attacks before hitting them with the same words they said to Sogetsu. "Don't overestimate yourselves in your next lives," and the two demons could only stare in despair at his blood-red eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, Shikamaru and the others who were barely holding on and hoping for help to arrive finally made a mistake. Is this the end? Shikamaru wondered as he could see an extremely fast demon surpass their defense and aim for his neck. He was the constant target of such attacks after the demons somehow realized that he was their strategist, and it appears like they were finally going to succeed in getting rid of him. However, at that last split second before everything was supposed to go dark for him, a shining green light suddenly fell from the sky right on top of the demon and directly broke him into pieces from the sheer impact of the force behind his kick. This. Shikamaru was left speechless, but the familiar man in front of him simply smirked and said, "Yo, Shikamaru, despair isn't something that should be on the face of youth." "Guy-sensei," Lee yelled at the top of his lungs with a happy look on his face, but his voice was suddenly muffled by the sound of thunder. And when the demons and ninja stared high at the sky, they saw giant thunderclouds gather before a giant beast of lighting emerged from them and landed on the demons, causing a lot of destruction as Kakashi, Sasuke and Naruto made their appearance. Meanwhile, seeing the state of the battle, Sasuke couldn't help but wonder, they actually survived this long. It seems like teacher was right, sometimes, a general is what's needed. Sasuke shot Shikamaru a look before he disappeared in a flash of lightning and started wreaking havoc among the demons. Thanks to the help of the backup that arrived, the demons were quickly dealt with, so everyone were finally able to take a breather. Everyone, you did well surviving for so long, Kakashi commended everyone for their hard work, and they all responded positively. Meanwhile, Bakurio, who just returned with the recovering Sogetsu, shot him a look and nodded. Surprisingly, Kakashi grew even stronger after he gave his Sharingan back to Obito. It is good to see that he finally put his past behind him and started growing stronger again. Then, he turned his attention to Sogetsu and frowned slightly. I should find a way for them to use those demons better. As Bakurio was deep in thought, Guy suddenly approached him and asked, the demons are attacking much more aggressively lately and we already started sustaining casualties on other fronts. Do you have any plans to deal with them? Hearing this, Bakurio snapped out of his thoughts and handed Sogetsu to Sakura to complete healing him before he said, we are fighting 4 different worlds, and considering how strong we've been growing, it's only natural they will increase the intensity of their attacks as well. At this rate, those ninjas that can't keep up with the growth speed of the others will slowly get eliminated. Kakashi spoke calmly after joining them, and it was indeed one of Bakurio's concerns. Still, he smiled slightly and said, I guess it's time to launch our counterattack. You mean? Guy was slightly surprised and so was Kakashi, but Bakurio calmly nodded at them and said, it's time to put an end to this war. Guy and Kakashi stared at each other in shock before they nodded and prepared for the coming future. Ellipsis. A few days later, the news quickly spread that Bakurio planned to start a counterattack on all 4 fronts, Beast World, Demon World, Hell, and Pure Land. For this, a giant meeting was held, and it was attended by all the leaders among the strong ninjas groups that slowly showed their potential throughout the years, the hidden villages, the academies, the samurais, the Akatsuki, and the mercenaries, as well as the 6 sacred grounds. They all sent their representatives to this meeting. Bakurio, how do you plan to attack them? We are barely surviving right now. Fugaku was the first to speak and he directly expressed his doubts regarding the situation, but Bakurio calmly nodded and said, I currently have 400 dead hunters under my command. They will split into 4 groups of 100 each, so we will have an immortal sand army of 10,000 members that will act as the front line. And you can't forget about the dead hunters themselves. I'm sure you all know how strong my clones are. The people nodded slowly and some were even scared when they heard how many of those clones Bakurio actually had. This man is a monster. What will happen when the war ends? Will he try to take control over our villages? The 4th Raikage wondered, and some people in the room had similar doubts, but Bakurio directly crushed them and said, you think this will guarantee us the war? Ignorance truly is bliss. Bakurio spoke mockingly and the Raikage was the first to lose his temper and yell. What do you mean? If you have information that you are hiding from us, you will pay the price for it. Enough Raikage, who do you think you are talking to? Fugaku's eyes instantly transformed into his Mangekyo Sharingan and he started releasing an ominous aura. He was really ready to kill him. Calm down everyone, I'm sure the Raikage is just worried, that's all. Onoki tried to mediate the situation as best as he could, but it didn't stop Fugaku from glaring at it until the latter started feeling uncomfortable. It's okay Fugaku, don't bother with that weakling, Bakurio said with a slight smile on his face, and it caused veins to appear on A's head and a lightning chakra cloak instantly covered his body before he asked coldly, what did you call me? Oh, is your hearing that bad? I called you a weakling, Bakurio replied with a toothy grin, and before anyone could react, A disappeared with a terrifying speed and sent a punch right at Bakurio's head while yelling, "Don't underestimate me, brat." "No, stop," Onoki yelled, but it was too late as A's punch was millimeters away from Bakurio's face. However, A suddenly felt the world darkening around him while the people in the room only heard the sound of something slamming into the floor, and when they lowered their heads, they noticed that Bakurio's foot was planted on A's face, and he still had the same toothy grin on his face as he asked, "Anyone else wants me to pay the price?" The room fell dead silent as they all couldn't comprehend what just happened. Only those with gifted eyes like Fugaku were able to tell. I was aiming at a mirror after image. At the moment he sent his punch, Bakurio's foot was already ready to smash him into the ground. He's grown too strong, and yet he's still not confident in our victory. This is worrying. The others had similar thoughts, but they didn't say anything, so Bakurio kicked it back to his seat and continued to explain his plan. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, somewhere in a dark throne room, the being called Jashin was staring coldly at this scene and smiled slightly. So you decided to oppose me to the end, huh? You will have only yourself to blame for this little brat. Then he calmly sent an order to all of his followers, be prepared, the final fight is finally upon us, kill them all, torture them all, and most importantly, make them feel helpless, until they lose their will to live. Yes, sir. Doji, Seryu, Izumo, and Amatsu responded immediately before they started making preparations. However, surprisingly they weren't the only ones that responded to Jashin. Ellipsis. At one of the fortresses on the border of the land of demons, Sogetsu and Kazuki were currently discussing how the former basically lost against the two demons and almost lost his life if not for their teacher saving him when suddenly, Bakurio approached them while carrying a large box on his back and said, "How are you doing, you two?" His gaze was mainly fixed on Sogetsu since he was the one that suffered a defeat lately, although it was actually a great achievement for him to be able to fight that level of opponents at his current age, but the kid wasn't satisfied. "Teacher, I'm fine, thanks to you," Sogetsu replied calmly, and Kazuki, not liking his brother's attitude, tried to liven up the mood, so he asked curiously, "Teacher, it's rare to see you carrying something on you, what's that?" Bakurio stared at Kazuki with a slight smile before he said, "I have a gift for the two of you." "A gift?" Kazuki was excited and even Sogetsu grew curious and felt his heavy heart becoming slightly lighter. "Yes, gifts, check them out yourselves," Bakurio spoke calmly before he put the giant box on his back down and opened its lid, revealing two well-designed katana swords. The handle of one of them was red, and its sheath was black and had white sun symbols engraved on it, while the other's handle was blue and had black moon symbols on its white sheath. The brothers were captivated by the two swords, and they couldn't get their eyes away from them to the point that they almost didn't hear Bakurio say, "These are the sun and the moon swords, two of the best swords in my collection, but I still need to make a slight modification for them before you two can have them, and hopefully put them to good use. We can't have them right away." The two excited brothers suddenly had disappointed looks on their faces. They even felt that their dear teacher was messing with them and playing around with their feelings by showing them these two great swords but not giving them right away. However, Bakurio's intentions were far beyond what they were expecting, as he said, "The sun sword can naturally absorb the energy from the sun and use it to increase the power of all fire-based techniques. As for the moon sword, it can do the same with the energy from the moon and you will be able to use it to increase the power of all water-related jutsu. The two of them also have a unique technique that can be unleashed called Sun Slash and Moon Slash. I will leave it for you to discover their powers later." Hearing Bakurio's explanation, the faces of both Sogetsu and Kazuki lit up once more, but Kazuki's face soon dimmed and he asked angrily, "Teacher, these swords are already so amazing, why can't you give them to us right away? Please give me a proper answer." Bakurio could see that fire was about to erupt from Kazuki's eyes if he keeps dragging this matter, so he smiled slightly and said, "You two have two troublesome entities inside of you that keep refusing to help you with the power they have, and I'm planning to bind them to these swords so that you can use their power in the future much more effectively." Hearing this, Kazuki's and Sogetsu's eyes widened in surprise. Throughout the years, they tried everything they can to convince the two demons Suya and Enja to allow them to use their power so that they enter a state similar to a Jinchuriki where the two sides synchronize their power to create a stronger form of the two. However, the two demons' pride stopped them from growing closer to the two kids. In fact, they kept using every possible opportunity to tempt the kids of getting them out of their seals, especially when they are desperate and needed their help out of a dangerous situation. But Kazuki and Sogetsu weren't idiots, and they never allowed the temptation of becoming stronger get to them no matter how much they desired this power. So hearing that their teacher found a way for them to use it, how can they not be both happy and surprised by such news? Meanwhile, the two demons were feeling the complete opposite as unease started growing in their hearts, but there was no turning back anymore. "Teacher, are you serious?" Sogetsu asked curiously, and seeing that Bakurio was clearly not messing around with them, he started feeling excited and he couldn't help but shoot a look at his brother, and Kazuki did the same. "They can still grow much stronger. My mastery in seals has increased and I found a way to perfect my living seals creation. Now I can make living weapons. The quality of the weapon, seals, and the soul imbued in them must all be carefully chosen, but I believe it will be successful," Bakurio explained calmly. The two swords were some of the spoils that dropped From the beast he's constantly hunting, and over the years, his primordial seal mastery kept increasing until it reached level 15, and he received a reward for it reaching level 10 as usual. Quest Primordial Seals 1. Reach level 10 in your Primordial Seals mastery. Reward: 30,000 points, Weapon Enchanting Manual. From this Weapon Enchanting Manual, he learned how to enhance the powers of weapons by imbuing them with seals, and it also strengthened his knowledge regarding living seals, which is why he was confident in enchanting the two swords. When are you going to start? Sogetsu asked curiously, and Bakurio simply smirked at him and said, now of course. Enja is screaming like crazy. He wants to talk to you, Kazuki suddenly said after feeling the demon inside him going berserk, and Sogetsu was feeling the same, but he simply ignored Suiya and didn't even feel that voicing his worries was worth it after he declined from helping against Akami and Mimim. As calm as he always appears, he was also vengeful to the bones. It doesn't matter, the time for talking is long past us, who wants to start first? Bakurio calmly said, and surprisingly both brothers raised their hands at the same time. They are both willing to take the risk for the other, huh? It's good to see their relationships going well despite them fighting all the time, Bakurio thought with a slight smile on his face before he said. Let's start with Suiya. He's much more troublesome and I'd rather deal with him quickly first. After saying this, Bakurio picked up the moon sword and slowly unsheathed it, showing its crystal clear surface and extremely sharp edge. But both Kazuki and Sogetsu noticed that it had many symbols engraved on it. However, Bakurio's next action made them freeze. He aimed the sword at Sogetsu's stomach and said, don't move no matter what. Teacher, what are you doing? Kazuki asked hesitantly, but Sogetsu calmly shook his head and said, just trust in teacher, before he nodded at Bakurio with a calm look on his face. Good kid, Bakurio said with a slight smile before mercilessly stabbing him in the stomach, to the shock of Kazuki, who couldn't help but yell in distress, brother. However, when he was about to take out the sword, he noticed that no blood was leaking from the wound. Instead, a dark substance was slowly traveling through the edge of the sword and an eerie yell was echoing from it. Bakurio, you damn devil, how can your mastery of souls and demonic energy be this strong? You can't be human. You can't be. This was of course Suiya who was yelling, and the two brothers felt shocked by his words as they understood that they hid a deeper meaning. Teacher can control demonic energy. I guess it's necessary to make sure that Suiya's gift is imbued in the sword, but when did he gain such mastery? Even the two of us can't control demon energy that well despite our origins. Sogetsu was truly confused, and so was Kazuki, but they simply watched silently. The demonic energy extracted from Sogetsu was immense. In fact, it was comparable to Kurama's chakra if not more. That's just how strong this ancient demon is, but now it was all seeping in the symbols engraved into the blade, and not long after, its crystal clear surface started releasing a chilly aura around it, signifying that the operation was successful. Then, Bakurio calmly took the sword out of Sogetsu and quickly healed his wound before he said, here you go, let's call this sword Peaceful Moon from now on, although I'm sure it will be anything but peaceful in your hands. Sogetsu nodded slightly to his teacher before he bowed deeply. Just by holding the sword, he understood that he's grown much stronger, but more importantly, he can feel that he could also use the gift of this demon through this sword. Thank you teacher. This favor, I don't know how I can repay it. What favor? This is a gift. What a stupid brat. Bakurio simply shook his head at Sogetsu, but it brought a smile to the latter's face. Meanwhile, sensing the strong aura coming from his brother's body when he held his sword, Kazuki quickly said, my turn. Sure, Bakurio replied with a smile before he started doing the same thing to Kazuki and enjoying the angry cries of Enja. It was like music to his ears. This is amazing, Kazuki muttered with a shocked look on his face as he stared at the sun sword that was now releasing a hot reddish aura. It was also turned into a living weapon by Bakurio and he could already feel strength coursing through his body just by holding it in his hand. Let's call this infernal sun. Make sure to show the world its true power. I'm sure plenty of beings are going to burn under its might. Bakurio spoke with a slight smile and Kazuki nodded hurriedly. Then, Bakurio started explaining to them. These swords were already strong before the integration of these demons' power, granting their user 100% increase in power to water or fire techniques, as well as having a unique attack called Sun Slash and Moon Slash. Now however, those abilities might have grown stronger thanks to the demon's gifts, so make sure to test them before you use them recklessly. This is especially directed to you, Kazuki. Kazuki froze slightly and seemed a bit embarrassed, and Bakurio could tell that he was about to try out the skill this sword had if he didn't warn him. Idiot. Sogetsu thought before he nodded at Bakurio, so their teacher finally concluded by saying, the peaceful demon's gift is to create the most destructive form of an element or technique. As for the infernal demon's gift, he can enhance the power or quality of his attacks by a certain factor. They seem similar but they are different, make sure to use them carefully. Yes teacher, by 2 inches. Kazuki and Sogetsu replied seriously as they strapped their new swords that were still shining slightly even when covered by their hilts, and seeing this, Bakurio patted their heads slightly before he disappeared. Ellipsis. That true clone of Bakurio's that helped the two brothers grow stronger wasn't the only one on the move. In fact, he was preparing as best he could before the start of the final war. The tailed beasts are basically useless. I already gained the friendship of all of them and earned a part of their strength. We will have to make better use for them. As Bakurio was thinking this, his body slowly moved closer to the Gate of Hell situated in the Land of Lightning. This place was guarded by the strongest ninjas that Kumo had to offer, but most importantly, Minato Namikaze was also keeping an eye on the situation in the dark along with one of Bakurio's true clones. After all, he couldn't trust a hidden village with such a monumental task, especially when the power of the devils has been increasing steadily throughout the years, so Minato was tasked to keep guard here after Kumo decided to stop their hard-headedness and joined their alliance. Bakurio-kun, do you need something from me? Minato, who was sitting in a meditative position and appearing as if he had become one with nature, suddenly opened his eyes and asked Bakurio curiously. Bakurio wasn't trying to hide his presence in the first place, so Minato's discovery didn't startle him. Instead, he calmly approached him and asked, how's the situation here? Minato's cheerful face dimmed slightly as he shot the giant gate in the distance that was oozing with Hell's chakra a cold look before he said, the devils emerging are growing stronger and stronger, and I had to interfere a lot lately. So far, the weakest devils emerging are at least Jonin level. However, we managed to turn the situation into a stalemate after we discovered that they could come back to life as their souls seemed to be returning to hell when they die and get stronger bodies each time, so we started sealing them instead of killing them. I'm sure you are aware of the general situation. Hearing this, Bakurio nodded at him with a frown on his face and stared silently at the gate, so Minato couldn't help but ask him curiously, you didn't come here just for this, right? Hearing this, Bakurio nodded at the perceptive Hokage and said, you are someone that has an affinity for space, something so rare that it can only be found on a handful of people in history, which is why you can use the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. However, that jutsu relies on seals to manipulate space, so it's not perfect. Minato seemed slightly surprised as he could tell where the discussion was going, and he couldn't help but ask Bakurio curiously, did you manage to learn how to manipulate space without seals? Bakurio nodded calmly after hearing this, but this simple gesture made a tsunami of emotions explode in Minato's heart. Sensing space is almost impossible. In fact, even someone like Minato could barely do it. This is because the other elements are covering it like a multi-layered blanket, making it harder to sense, so the best one can do is sense the faintest trace of it, but it's not enough for them to be able to manipulate it with their chakra. But Tobirama, the genius who created the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, didn't allow this fact to shake his confidence, and he tried multiple ways to enhance his space affinity so that he could discern space much better and create a jutsu that can manipulate it. Yet no matter how much he tried, he found it impossible to increase his affinity with space. So, he started looking at it from a different perspective. If you can't make your hearing better, you just need to increase the sound, and he applied this same principle in his research. The FTGJ he created made use of seals to develop some sort of amplifier for space, so just like an anchor, he can now always sense that point in space that he marked even if he's far away from it, but it wasn't perfect. That's only after Minato managed to make it possible to use it to create several amplifiers, so to speak, without them interfering with each other, which greatly improved on Tobirama's limited version of the jutsu. However, no further advancements were made to this jutsu afterward, showing just how hard it was, which is why Minato was surprised by Bakurio, who appeared to find a way to achieve such a thing. After a slight contemplation, Bakurio calmly explained, The reason we can't sense space is because of the veil that hides it from our perception, so, all we have to do is remove that veil. That's easier said than done, Minato replied with a helpless smile, but Bakurio's face didn't change at all as he said, wind, fire, earth, water, and lightning, these are the elements that are affecting our perception the most, and indeed, trying to remove all of them is close to impossible. However, I created a method that makes use of one while only requiring to remove the other four. Make use of one of them to manipulate the other four. Minato asked with an absent-minded look on his face while his mind worked on overdrive to figure out what Bakurio meant, but he simply couldn't find anything. Manipulating the elements individually is useless since more would take their place, so what possible way did Bakurio came up with? Curious, he directly asked, and Bakurio simply smiled and responded. First of all, absorb the lightning element into the body to enhance the nervous system and the perception of the user and use it as a guide to direct the rest. Then use this enhanced perception to merge the rest of the four elements and make a tunnel through the exposed space with them. This, Minato was shocked, but Bakurio wasn't done explaining. Merging wind, fire, and earth allows a person to control particles. When you add water to the mix, you can manipulate space. And I already found the perfect ratio for this kind of operation. Then Bakurio raised his hand and the lightning in the air was instantly absorbed into his body, and he started gathering the rest of the elements and merging them together until a black hole-like thing appeared in his hand, and Minato can see a passage made of lightning swirling inside it, but he didn't know where it led. This is the way to manipulate space, although it consumes a lot of chakra. Amazing, was all Minato could say as he stared at the opening in space over Bakurio's hand in wonder. As Bakurio kept manipulating space in front of Minato, he suddenly put his hand inside the swirling black hole, and Minato instantly noticed that it appeared behind him and was going to grab him, but he didn't react and simply stared at the vortex curiously. Bakurio-kun can probably already teleport to any place he wishes instantly without the need for seals to pinpoint the location. As Minato contemplated this, he heard Bakurio say, "This new jutsu is still under work, as I can only teleport to locations that I can see or sense, so it vastly limits the range of my movement compared to your flying thunder god jutsu, but I'm sure we can further improve it if we work together." Bakurio was able to develop this technique thanks to his blink and void sword skills that both used space, but he still didn't find a way to lock into the space of a faraway location accurately. Of course, that's only if he excludes the use of his Tenseigen or other jutsu that allows him to sense long distances. Hearing what he said, Minato shrugged awkwardly and said, "Just this alone is already amazing. This opens many possibilities for attacking, not just defending like FTG jutsu. Help me learn how to use it." And so Bakurio spent some time teaching Minato how to open portals in space. However, they couldn't train in peace for a long time because a strong stench of hell suddenly hit them as the portal not that far away from them started flickering with an ominous light, startling the ninjas guarding it, and not long after, two humanoid devils emerged from it, followed by many devils in all kinds of shapes and forms. One of the humanoid devils had short gray hair and sharp brows, and he held a sword on his waist, while the other wore a scholarly outfit and held a staff in his hand. They were Hokusai and Shu, two of the first devils that Bakurio fought against before, and they were surprisingly releasing much more tyrannical auras compared to what he recalled. "Minato, be careful, these two are dangerous." Bakurio warned with a frown, confused by the devil's appearance here. Is it a coincidence? "Okay, I will be careful," Minato replied with a nod before the two of them rushed to the gate instantly and started ordering the ninjas there to take care of the weaker devil while they would handle the two strong ones. Ellipsis. Shu, keep calm when we face him, and remember, we are only here to gauge his strength. Don't overdo it. Hokusai spoke calmly while ignoring the army of ninjas in front of him. "Damn devils, go back from where you came, will you?" Darui, the Jonin leader of Kumo, spoke coldly, but he was only met with a disdainful look from Hokusai before he put his hand on his sword and the whole world seemed to grow still. Darui stared in shock at a weird silver light that kept growing in his vision, but no one was able to move to defend against it or stop it. "Am I going to die?" was the last thought on Darian's mind before a man covered in an orange chakra cloak appeared in front of him at a frightening speed. His body was covered in weird seals, but from the haori he was wearing that had "Fourth Hokage" written on it, he instantly concluded who it was. "This is, thank God," thought Darui, and he watched as a giant hand emerged from Minato's back and blocked Hokusai's sword slash. although it was cut in two halves. This must be his Jinchuriki transformation. I've never seen him use it before. The situation must be dangerous. You are Minato Namikaze, right? You've been defending this location in the dark and used your mastery of seals to cause us many casualties. This is a good chance to deal with you, Shu. The scholarly-looking devil spoke with an evil smirk. However, it soon turned into a frown as a man with long dark hair appeared next to Minato and stared at them coldly with his blood-red eyes. You finally show yourself, huh? How about you bring your real body here before you regret it? Shu spoke with deep hatred in his eyes. He could still vividly remember how Bakurio tore him apart in the past and he had to recover in hell for a long time. Bakurio-kun, you know them? Minato asked Bakurio while eyeing the two dangerous individuals in front of him. Bakurio stared at Shu calmly before he said, this guy can merge Hell's energy with the various releases and he's very proficient in it, and he can transform into a lion humanoid monster as well. As for the other guy, I'm not sure, I didn't see him use his full power before. It seems like they are here for me. Bakurio thought with a frown. I see, Minato replied and prepared himself for a tough fight as he immediately took out his special kunai and spread them all over the battlefield while Shu stared coldly at Bakurio and said, we've grown far stronger than you can imagine thanks to Lady Amatsu's blessing. Prepare yourself, Hell's burning lance. Minato's felt a chill as he stared at the giant lance made of blue flames that Shu conjured from out of nowhere before it started rotating, creating a terrifying and sharp sound. Die. Bakurio-kun, be careful. Minato was about to step in front of the attack and teleport it away, but Hokusai, who's been standing silently, suddenly put his hand on his sword, and without any sign of him drawing it out he calmly said, Devil Kenjutsu. A silver light instantly formed in front of Minato. So fast. Minato thought before he teleported away to one of his kunai and instantly formed a giant Rasenshuriken on top of a chakra hand which he then sent at Hokusai. Meanwhile, Bakurio calmly stared at the giant lance made of fire coldly, but to the shock of everyone, his Sharingan simply flickered slightly before a similar lance made out of blue flames started forming behind him. Impossible. How can you control Hell's energy without going through Hell's baptism? Shu yelled in disbelief, and even Hokusai was distracted by this as his eyes narrowed dangerously before he launched a slash to stop Minato's Rasenshuriken, creating a giant explosion between them. However, even this sound didn't stop them from hearing Bakurio's words as he said coldly, nothing is impossible for me anymore. I refuse to believe it, Shu yelled again before he launched his Hell Lance, and Bakurio did the same, creating a giant blue explosion between them that threatened to evaporate anything in its vicinity. Why you? How could this be possible? Shu was confused, and not only the devils, even Minato was confused by Bakurio's ability, but Bakurio simply stared at them calmly and thought, my energy control is far beyond what you people might think. Currently, his energy control was already at level 24, and despite its low level, he could actually control any type of energy in existence already. This is how terrifying this mastery is, and he received a great reward once it reached level 10, an item that can become one of his greatest weapons in the future. Little frogs living in a well, what do you know about possible or impossible? Bakurio replied with a shrug, getting even further on the devil's nerves. Meanwhile, Minato landed beside him with a slight smile on his face and said, we should seal them no matter what to make the future easier. These are exactly my intentions, Bakurio replied with a nod, but suddenly two terrifying auras burst from Shu and Hokusai as the former spoke, you think you can look down on us? The sky suddenly darkened as if affected by the rage of these devils, but Minato and Bakurio remained unfazed. Good luck, you will need it, was the last thing Bakurio said before he rushed at Shu at a frightening speed. Thank you for listening guys, see you in the next part.